Speaker.
Matt Ducey.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure and an honour to rise in wholehearted support of the Social Security Extension of Young Person Services and Remedial Matters Amendment Bill in its third reading. I'd just like to say what an exciting piece of legislation and what an exciting project to back youth services. Just to like to acknowledge all those people who work in the youth services and the hard work they do. And what we do know is that when we look at the review of youth services in 2014, they found all the young people, 4 out of 5 of them were in education, were in training, or were in part-time or full-time employment, Mr. Speaker. What a great initiative, what great services to support some of the most vulnerable young people that we have, Mr. Speaker, because we know on this side of the House, for these vulnerable young people, the way to get them back on track is to get them into employment, get them into education, get them into training, so they'll go on to be productive members in New Zealand society, Mr. Speaker. And I'd just like to let those vulnerable young people know that it was the opposition that said no to this bill. The opposition does not want them to engage in youth services that will provide them with vital education, employment and training that will help them go on and be productive members of society. How arrogant. What an arrogant opposition that's preventing vulnerable young adults gaining what they need to succeed in life. Well, I'm proud to be on this side of the House that's backing those young people, Mr. Speaker, and backing those youth services that's making such a vital difference in our young people's lives, Mr. Speaker. When you look at those young people, Mr. Speaker, the complexity of working with these young people, 38% of victims of domestic violence, 76% victims of emotional neglect, 5% homeless or victims of sexual abuse, and pretty much all of them have disengaged from mainstream education. And that's why it's right that we invest in these social services. They provide intensive and active wraparound services that will put these young people at the heart of the care that they need to help them get out of benefit dependency. We know when we look at people that go on the job seekers benefit, there's about a 6-month window of opportunity. If we can get in there in those first 6 months and we can steer them into a direction of employment, training and education, Mr. Speaker, because we do know when you look at future liability of dependents for beneficiaries that most of them have got on the benefit at an early age of life. If you go on at the age of 18 or 19, you're resigned to being on there 13 years. And that's what the opposition want. They're happy for those people to languish there for over 13 years. And that's an arrogant opposition, Mr. Speaker. So on this side of the House, we're investing in youth services. We're opening up the provision and the entitlement that our vulnerable
Order. I am just going to interrupt the member and ask my colleague, Lewis Wall, not to indicate that about the Speaker. Thank you.
Tom Ducey. Matt Ducey. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
I remember the talented
But it's good to hear my father getting good name recognition after those 22 international referee games that he refereed. So back to this bill, Mr. Speaker. When we look at these young people, Mr. Speaker, what we want to do is to get them into education, employment and training. We know that when we put $1 into these youth services, Mr. Speaker, it will result in a reduction of $2.53 of future liability. This is about social investment, Mr. Speaker. We're investing in projects that will go on and benefit young people, and ultimately, with our BPS target...
Order. I regret interrupting the member again, I am going to have to warn my colleague Lewis Wall now. One cannot interject across the House for members to be honest, because what that implies is that they are being dishonest, and if one believes that, then the appropriate approach is to write a letter to the Speaker on a privileges matter, or to debate it if the member thinks that the person is being accidental rather than deliberate in the approach. So I won't have that sort of interjection. Matt Ducey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This is a $61 million investment into young people. The sooner we pass this legislation, the better. That's why I'll sit down, and that's why I urge opposition speakers to take a short call so this legislation can be passed tonight and our young people will be supported into being productive members of society. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Jan Logie.